This lecture is about the transactional model of communication. So communication is defined as the process of planning, creating, delivering, and interpreting messages both verbally, which is defined as writing and speaking, and non-verbally through gestures and symbols. A non-verbal communication might be if you tell me something that your assignment is late, that I frown. That is a non-verbal form of communication that I'm not happy. Or if you tell me that you just bought me a Tim Hortons coffee, then I'm going to smile, which would be a non-verbal message to you that I'm pretty happy that I got a coffee. Business communications is very important in the business world. It's one of the highest ranked skills that employers look for. You can see in this chart that communication skills is up near number one, but also if you look at people skills, which is the number one skill, communication skills is a key component of people skills. I've never found anybody who has good people skills that doesn't communicate well. I don't know how you could be a person that is said to have good people skills when you are a poor communicator. So communication skills are a big part of people skills. So if you've got strong people skills, you have strong communication skills. So this is the transactional communication model. And what it is where we have on the left-hand side, you are the sender, I'm the sender, and I'm going to encode a message. So in my mind, I've got something that I want to send to you. I want you to do something. And you and I have a code. And that code is, it doesn't really seem like a code, but you and I have a secret language or secret code, and that is the language of English. And so if we were to be sitting in the middle of, I don't know, a country in Africa that doesn't speak English, you and I could sit at a coffee shop and converse, and no one around us would understand us because they don't know the code. So we encode things all the time. And so I have a message, and in fact, we encode both verbal and nonverbal messages. So it doesn't, probably there's not a lot of thinking doing it, but when you give me my Tim Hortons coffee, I'm doing a quick encoding of I'm happy and I smile. And so that is a form of encoding. But, mostly this model is talking about sending communications, probably either written or face-to-face verbal. So I have a thought in my mind, I encode it, and I send it to you. And there could be some barriers in the encoding. I may not code it very well, what I'm thinking, and I don't really communicate very well in writing, which often happens with people. It's very clear in our heads, but then we put it to paper, it's not quite as clear. But there can be barriers on the transmission side, and the barriers on the transmission side might be that, a simple barrier would be that I enter the wrong email address, and so it bounces back. So that's a barrier to the communication process, and we'll talk about barriers in a little while. And I choose my medium, which could be a text or an email or face-to-face. And then there may be some barriers on you receiving it. So for instance, a very common barrier, if you have Yahoo email, is every once in a while, Yahoo will randomly send emails to your junk And so even though we've communicated for years, suddenly Yahoo decides that your email is junk and I don't get it. So that would be a barrier on the receiver side. And then the receiver decodes it. Now, often we decode the same way that I encoded the message. Show up at Starbucks at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Here's the address. If that's what I encoded, you're probably going to decode it correctly. But if I said meet me at the Starbucks in Chinatown, well, maybe there's 2 Starbucks in Chinatown. So you may decode that differently, that you're thinking of different Starbucks. So you decode it, and then you may have some feedback. You may, this may be an iterative process. It's not clear. So for instance, if I said Starbucks in Chinatown, you might send something back saying, do you mean the one on Main Street or do you mean the one on Kiefer Street? That would be a feedback. Now, if you are very effective at your communications, then you try to avoid this feedback, right? If I'd written the message better, I wouldn't have had to have that communication. So now, instead of me just sending the message, I've got to do another message. So it pays to be more efficient in your communication the first time, so that you don't have this iterative process. And you may choose a different medium to respond back to me. You might, for instance, if I send you a complicated email that's confusing, you might just pick up the phone and call me and say, hey, Steve, got your message. I just want to clarify something. And it can be resolved maybe in 5 seconds versus you spending 10 minutes writing an email and trying to clarify it. So that is the basic process of the transactional process of communication. So if we want to look at some of the barriers a little bit more, I talked about the physical barrier of that the email went to the wrong address, or because I coded it wrong. But physiological are issues with the body, and so an older person may have a hearing disability, so that would be a physiological barrier. So they may not hear everything you say. A psychological barrier is trust and anger are examples of that. So a lack of trust. So if there's a lack of trust, that's a psychological barrier. And even though you're correct, I may not believe you if you have betrayed me before. So an example of that is the U.S. Center for Disease Control. Generally a very trustworthy organization, but they have sent out information that now is inconsistent with what they've sent out before. For instance, previously they said don't wear masks, and now they say wear masks. They said that the hospitals were going to be overrun with people, and now they weren't overrun. And so it's not really clear. The trust level is a problem for them, and that's a big problem because they need to communicate important information to us. But people are losing trust when you communicate too many pieces of incorrect information. You lose that trust. If someone is angry, then they are not generally receptive to communications. So if you're a police officer, one of the things that you're trained in is what's called de-escalation. So if someone is very angry, if you ever, unfortunately I live downtown, so I get to see the Vancouver police deal with a lot of angry people. And what they do is they spend a long time de-escalating the situation, listening to the person, talking to them, and getting them not to be angry so they can talk to them and talk their way through the situation, because police forces are not really, their jobs are much more different than they were 25 years ago. They don't like to slap handcuffs on people. They like to change behaviors. So they are very big at de-escalating. And if you're, someone who works at the FBI as a a hostage negotiator, they're highly trained in de-escalating situations so that they don't have to, shoot the hostage taker. And then semantic is your choice of words. So sometimes things are not absolutely clear in how you say them. So there can be different meanings for words. So that can cause some confusion. Jargon, I gave examples in the PowerPoint that are posted on some different jargon, especially in government, in military. They have a lot of jargon that they use, which may not, when they're talking to other people, they may not understand it. And even within, let's say, the military, the jargon they use on a aircraft carrier in the Navy is different jargon than they might use at an Air Force base in the middle of the Nevada desert. So even within those organizations, they have different languages across the branches, or even ships versus, submarines. And then there's often mixed messages which can interfere or cause a barrier in the communication. So if I say congratulations on your new job, but I have this frown on my face, well, that you're getting a mixed message there that I'm saying congratulations, but I'm frowning. So maybe I'm actually jealous that you got the job and I didn't get it.